back and ready for racing action here in the GT Cup Championship at Donington Park. Of course, it is once again the endurance race, so we'll be doing the longer of the two races, back up to 50 minutes. As we had yesterday when GCAT Racing's Seamus Jennings and Greg Catton took victory. Should be a lot of fun, this one. Weather is slightly different than yesterday. It's a little bit cooler. It's down about 3 or 4 degrees than it was yesterday afternoon at 15 degrees Celsius. The wind is also down ever so slightly, down to 16 kilometers an hour. Yesterday it was just peaking around the sort of lower 20s, of course. The big difference, though, is that we have had a little bit of rain this afternoon. So it's just kind of changed the complexion a little bit of the circuit. By rain, I mean it's been sprinkles. It's not really been any heavy stuff, so definitely a dry circuit, but there is still the threat of that throughout the race. If you didn't join us for yesterday's race, as I said before, it was Seamus Jennings and Greg Catton who took the victory for GCAT Racing. Paul Bailey and David Brabham were in second position in the Kendall Developments Lamborghini GT3 in the GTO category, and then it was the two GTCs, the Top Cats Racing cars, of course, Charlotte Gilbert, Tom Rawlings, and then Warren Gilbert and Fraser Fenwick. But of course, for the Top Cats Racing number 2 car, that's the Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings driven car, that was the one that obviously is now leading the overall championship. The race earlier on today, which was the sprint yesterday, it was the number 3 Top Cats Racing car, the Warren Gilbert, Fraser Fenwick driven car, that was able to take the victory. In the GTH category, which is like the real jump when it comes to different categories, of course it was Paddock Motorsports who actually took the victory. Michael Warren and Martin Plowman taking victory from the Forsetti Motorsports car of Sam Nazaire and Mikey Porter. The two of those not separated by too much across the line, just about a second and a bit, but the important bit there was that Forsetti were looking really strong throughout the majority of the day, and alas, they still didn't take the victory. So a bit of a shame on that one. It does seem as well, we had a bit of a question yesterday as to whether we would see the 370 Jolt Racing car out there. It was not out in qualifying earlier on in the day, so not 100% sure as to whether we'll see that one out there, and I don't see it on the grid. Would be a big shame. And we're also getting the note that obviously from the back of the grid from qualifying, it'll be Murphy who has been sent to the back according to race control. I think it'll be starting a little bit further off. There, of course, is Tom Walpole in the number 13 KTM. Fantastic looking car, very quick as well, and it was able just about yesterday to hang on. I think it was to 5th position in the track. Yeah, it was indeed 5th position. The Track Focus car was able to beat out Chris Murphy over the line. Was the first car a lap down. As we'll get ourselves ready for the race. They're all just getting themselves onto the grid and ready to go. And once they roll their way around, we'll update you with the grid order. Yesterday we had 2 non-classified drivers, non-classified teams rather. Obviously there was the Jolt Racing car, which was technically listed as a starter. They were stationary in the pit lane, but they never went out to do a lap. And then there was the CTR Developments car. That is the Porsche 935, which I'm trying to see if I can see it out my window, but I can't. It'll be the bright orange thing, the kind of classic Porsche, and I don't actually see it on the grid. So I've only got 10 cars to what I can see through my own eyes out there on the grid. So maybe we might see that car start from the pit lane. But at the moment, it certainly isn't out there, at least as far as my eyes show. So Richard Chamberlain might not be out there. We'll figure it out as soon as we begin the formation lap, which now gets itself underway. So it will be the number 3 starting from the pole. So you might see the number 2 car starting at the front on the starting grid, but they've actually been sent to the back of the field as well. I did notice them at the back, but there we go. We can see, so it's Gilbert, then Fenwick, obviously in that car for Top Cats Racing. The victors yesterday in the first race, in the shorter of the 2 races, and then it is the number 28, the Kendall Developments car with Bailey and Brad behind the wheel. Tom Walpole will be starting from 3rd position for the track-focused KTM, and then the race winners minutes yesterday. Donington Caton will be starting from 4th. Then we'll get Keith Bush for the Team Parker Racing car, the Netherham Porter, of course the team that finished runner-up in the GTHs yesterday. They start one position ahead of the team that beat them yesterday. Paddock Motorsports will be starting from 7th place. Then we get the Simpson Motorsport car, which finished a few laps down. Then Gilbert and Rawlings will be starting from the rear of the field, alongside Chris Murphy for the Woodrow Motorsports car. Does seem as though we might not get the number, or we might not get that Porsche 935 out onto the circuit, sadly, which is a shame because I do quite like the look of it. Obviously, it did end up in the gravel trap yesterday, so for Richard Chamberlain, might not be any racing action on this Sunday afternoon. Maybe there is the chance for them to enter the race by the time we go racing for the second of the 2 races, which will be later on in the afternoon. Obviously, when we get ready for the for the penultimate end of the season. Sorry, the penultimate weekend of the season to come to an end with that sprint race a little bit later on. But of course, here for the feature race, should be very interesting. It was that 33 car, the Porsche, that sat back 3rd in line that took victory yesterday. It really came down, though, to the pit stops. A shorter pit stop for them, courtesy of the rules and regulations. They have a shorter pit stop than the others, courtesy of basically success and all this kind of stuff. It's all very confusing and complicated, but they had a shorter pit stop yesterday. We'll see about today as to whether they're able to work their way up and through and maybe take yet another victory. Both the races at Donington Park at the start of the season when we were running Donington National, it was indeed the GCAT racing car that took victory in the pair of them. Could that be turned on its head today? It'll be the number 3 Top Cats racing car starting alongside the 28 Kendall Developments car as we get ready to go racing for the endurance race here, the second of the endurance races at Donington Park Grand Prix. Not long left to go in the season. 50 minutes is put onto the clock. They'll have to make a pit stop during this race as they race their way down to the first corner. Much better launch as we head down into the turn 1 from our drivers that were starting from pole position. So it will be the Gilbert Fenwick car starting and leading, but it will be a switch for second position as Kendall Developments get pushed down the order as GCAT make the move to the inside. So that GCAT Porsche moves its way up into second position. The track-focused KTM now having the mirrors filled by the Lamborghini Super Trofeo of Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings. That's the second of the Top Cats racing cars. Meanwhile, the 2 GTHs that were battling for the victory yesterday remain involved in that battle. It'll be Forsetti leading from the Paddock Motorsports car at the moment. Now hitting McLean up towards the crest at Coppice as they come up and over the top. There is the look at the championship leaders in the overall category. The Lamborghini Super Trofeo that was impressive yesterday. Finished in 3rd position yesterday. To be fair, after a little bit of assistance from the teammates who were going on the attack late on, but decided not to fight for it. To the inside, though, with Tom Walpole. And that will be the Top Cats car then up into 4th position at the moment, already staring at the rear end of the other Lamborghini there, the number 28 Kendall Developments car. Obviously, again, whilst these two might look similar, they are most certainly not the same. One of them's a Lamborghini Super Trofeo spec'd out Huracan. The other one's just a Lamborghini Huracan GT3 spec, as there was a bit of a slide there from Paddock as they were working their way out of the Melbourne hairpin. Out onto the start-finish straight then to complete the first lap. It's going to be Top Cats number 3 leading from the GCAT Racing Porsche, then Kendall Developments, then the Top Cats Racing number 2 car before we get the track-focused KTM of Tom Walpole, and then of course the battle for the GTH lead between the Forsetti Motorsports car and of course Paddock. Down into Hollywood and the Craner curves. See how close the Lamborghini Super Trofeo is going to get on that Huracan. At the moment, still plenty of space between the pair of them, but that was a wider line as they begin their rise out through the old hairpin. They go, going through Starkey's underwear, well, where the bridge used to be. But alas, not taking any major risk is the number 2. Just sat there and waiting behind at the moment that Kendall Developments car as we come up and over at McLeanton now into Coppice. Still not finding that opportunity. Realistically, the safest opportunity around here always is that run down into Redgate. Do you remember that first corner of the circuit is the easiest place to make a move? If not, if you've got a car that's a bullet in a straight line, you might be able to do it down into the Fog ES, and that's exactly what has happened. So Top Cats number 2 car moves its way into 3rd position. And it's the same top three that we had in the early phases of yesterday, where, of course, we did see it for the early running. It was the two Top Cats racing cars, then it was GCat Racing, who then post-pit stop had a comfortable lead, but GCat Racing did have to come back into the pit lane after serving a pit stop that was too short, so they had to come in and do a 8.9 second stop and go, if I remember correctly. Whether they'll have to do that one again, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm sure they won't get the timing so wrong today. Nice and spreading out at the opening portion of this race. No major battles, no major dramas. Of course, that will build as we head on. Walpole is feeling the pressure, of course, from the Forsetti Aston Martin that is directly behind them. But at the moment, it's the big lead that's already been pulled out. 2.8 seconds for the Gilbert Fenwick car. That's now just set a 1 minute 30.418. Fastest lap yesterday, though, was quite significantly faster. It was in the hands of that GCat Racing car, if I remember correctly. Set a 27.0 throughout a lot of the second phase of the race. Was actually running closer to maybe a second and a half a lap faster. But again, conditions are slightly different. It is colder out there. There is a lot more cloud coverage out there. The track temperature will most certainly be a lot colder than it was yesterday afternoon. And as much as the wind is slightly lower, it's coming from basically the exact same direction. So maybe slightly more across you. So at this point, it's basically a total headwind. As you're coming down into Redgate, into turn one, it's coming off of the front left of the car. So it's heading in from that side. So it's not really going to make too much of a difference in these. Certainly more so in the Super Trofeos and the GTOs, GTCs, like the higher categories. The GTHs probably won't notice too much of a difference, but it does make a subtle difference. You can tell by the flag there. That's what I'm basing my knowledge of the where the wind's coming from off at the moment. As they head down into turn one, there is the number 72, of course, that BMW M3 GTR car that I've got a bit of a soft spot for. That era of Beamer is topped primo, but also, I mean, it just looks cool, doesn't it? It's got a lot of downforce. That rear wing is massive. Certainly looks almost specced out to go up Pikes Peak. In that vein, the Woodrow car as it heads up the hill now. But Chris Murphy ended up finishing in 6th position yesterday. Could well be getting some more. There is a look at the number 21, of course. That is the James Kay and Darren Ridge Simpson Motorsports car. It finished 4 laps down yesterday as they get to grips with the BMW M4. Obviously in the GTH category. There's a slower car generally than our race-leading cars, but getting to grips with them can be slightly different. Brakes still on as they were leaving the corner, but not everyone's a pro racing driver, so struggling to maybe get used to it as they head their way now down into the Craner curves. Obviously, the most important bit, whether you're struggling with the racetrack or not, just keep on the racing line. No matter how quick you're going, just stay on the racing line. That'll be where you'll start to find that speed. Tight line coming down into the old hairpin, and now up the hill. Not too bad. Love the livery on that car, by the way. You definitely can't miss it, can you? Any car that's got pink on it is one to be ticked off in my book. I've always said I come a little bit more from like the esports side of things, where every car is black and red. It's so boring. When you get cars like that, you're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty fun. 4 seconds though is the race leader, and you can see already closing down on the car we were just looking at there. So the Simpsons car is going to go a lap down pretty quickly, because the number 3 Warren Gilbert and Fenwick car being raced at the moment up to the rear end. So Warren Gilbert, Fraser Fenwick, they'll be moving their way up in, well, they're still the race lead, but up the track position. And putting that Simpson Motorsport car 1 lap down. So the Lamborghini Super Trofeo that leads by 4 seconds. Again, not 100% sure as to who's behind the wheel at present. Whether it is Warren Gilbert or Fraser Fenwick, but either way, they are most certainly driving around and driving pretty quickly at this point in the race. Do remember though, they will have potentially a slightly longer pit stop. I'll read you through that the closer we get to it, but to give you the rundown, it depends on what kind of drivers that you've got. as to how long your pit stop will be, as well as success seconds as well. And the time, they have a specific time that they are forced to make the pit stop in this race. So because it's day 2, it's slightly different than it was yesterday, where they were pitting between the 24th and 29th minute. Today, for Group 1, so that's the GTO, the GT3 and the GTC cars, that is the light blue, the dark blue and the green on your tower on the left-hand side. Those cars will be now stopping between the 29th and 35th minute of this race. And the second group, which is the GTHs, GTBs, GTAs, which we don't have, so it's just the GTH car. So those will be the 9, the 11 and the 21. They will all be making their pit stop earlier this race, so they will be working their way into the pit lane between the 24th and 29th minute of this race. So they can basically pit bang on halfway as we head up with the track-focused car. Tom Walpole's giving a bit of pressure to the number 28 at the moment in that KTM, flashing of the lights to pass the message over to the Simpson Motorsport car, just to say, look, I'm coming through here as well because I've got a position that I'm desperate to find my way into, going through the Fogger ES and closing right the way back down on the Kendall Developments car that's pulled out a little bit of a margin going through the Fogger ES, a little bit too deep though on the brakes as they head down the hill. And now up towards the final corner. It will indeed be the Bailey Brabham car hanging on to that 4th position at present. I do suspect though that KTM's a little bit quicker. Looking at the lap times at the moment, it does seem to lean that way in favour of the KTM of Tom Walpole. The previous lap time was a 33.7 actually. Plays a 33.4 for the Bailey Brabham Lamborghini GT3. So actually pace was in advantage of that black and yellow Lambo that currently hangs on to 4th position. Someone who's not struggling for speed in the circuit though, it is our race leaders. Gap now 4.3 seconds. Last lap time was a 1 minute 29.567, which is about 0.3 of a second faster than your drivers running in 2nd position. So, like I say, solid margin at the moment appearing for our race leader. As we're not getting too much drama in this race. It's nice and calm, and you can even tell that by looking in the garages. Everyone's pretty relaxed and pretty comfortable at the moment. That was looking into the garage of the Jennings Caton car, as they're all just relaxing at the moment, getting ready for the pit stop. And I've said before, I said yesterday, it's the pit stop that really defines these races. That's the one that will completely separate this pack. You know, when you come to it, if you're struggling at the moment, they'll all be well aware as to kind of how much time they're going to be gaining, losing, and whatnot through the pit lane. So at the moment, like I say, they'll not be too concerned in either paddock, in either camp at the moment, as is still going to be the number 3 leading. The track-focused KTM still right on the rear end of the Kendall Developments Lamborghini. And the previous lap time between the pair of them was pretty much exactly the same. A 1 minute 33.45 for one and a 4.62 for the other. Fastest first sectors just come in though from the Charlotte Gilbert Tom Rawlings car. There is the GTH leader. Obviously the Forsetti car that finished in 2nd position yesterday. It's pulled out 10 seconds already on the McLaren Artura that belongs to Paddock. So as much as there was the battle between the pair of them in the early stages, clearly running a slightly different form of attack in this one, as again they'll be coming into the pit lane, or the pit lane will be opening for them, shall I say, in about 13-14 minutes time. Once we hit 26 on the timer at the top, counting down, then we're in the 24th minute of the race, and that means the GTH cars can all come into the pit lane. So it'll be the Forsetti car, the Paddock car, and the Simpson car, the number 21. They'll all be allowed to enter the pit lane and have service to their car, and most importantly, as per the rules, switch the driver. That is what they really have to do in the pit lane. That's your major thing. There are some teams which you'll note out there like Keith Bush in the T Parker racing car, Chris Murphy, of course, in that CTR. Sorry, the Woodrow Motorsports car. CTR is a different team. In that Woodrow Motorsports car, and of course Tom Walpole in that KTM. They're all just single driver entries in this, and that's absolutely fine. But they still have to stay in the pit lane for the required period. Fastest first sector once again comes in for the Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings car. But fastest second sector of the race is just coming for our race leader, the Warren Gilbert Fraser Fenwick car. So that one's gone quicker indeed, and on the previous lap pulled out an extra 0.4 of a second to drag the gap to over 5 seconds. The McLaren Artura that we were having a look at there, that of course was the Orant and Plowman one, just 1.1 seconds ahead of Keith Bush. But this is the battle for 4th position at the moment. The Kendall Development Lamborghini keeping the track-focused KTM at bay as we head down into the Fog at ES. Slow run coming in from the Lamborghini. Could this be the time for that number 13 KTM to pounce? The inside they're going to look coming down the hill. Quite a light car, that KTM. Could go for the up and under as we depart the Melbourne hairpin. And it will indeed be that. So the KTM will drag itself alongside. Going to be a big move to the outside though, and the pure grunt of that Lamborghini Huracan is able to keep it in 4th position for now. But you kind of get the feeling the pace is certainly more in favour of Tom Walpole at the moment as they depart the final corner and onto the Wheatcroft straight. Lamborghini is able to keep him at bay, which means that Tom Walpole really will need to do this in the corners. Will need to be brave somewhere as the gap for the race lead grew by 1.4 seconds on that lap. Excellent lap from our race leading number 3 Top Cats racing car that's just set a 1 minute 29.143, playing a 1 minute 30.522 for the Jennings Caton GCAT racing car that again has been victorious 3 times at Donington Park in 2024. Up the hill and onto the brakes into McLean's. This is where that KTM's going to be quicker. A little bit of a wider line as they come through McLean's up towards Coppice for the Kendall Developments Lamborghini. But as soon as we head out onto the Starkey straight, it will be advantage towards that Lamborghini and its V10 power as we head down into the Fog at ES. So Tom Walpole will have to wait for now. Trying to wait for a mistake, basically, from that Lamborghini at the moment, as the cloud coverage is getting a little bit darker, by the way. It's certainly more noticeable at the moment, although I will say I can't see any umbrellas from any of the fans and patrons that are around the circuit, so it's certainly not raining out there at present. But, you know, the wind's blowing. It's just picked up just a touch over the last couple of minutes. And with that, there could be some rain, could be some drama. Had some rain in a race earlier on in the day, and it did cause quite a bit of drama as they're all getting ready for the pit stops and such. No dramas though, no stress. Just keeping it nice and calm. Maybe going to have a look outside the back of the garage as well to investigate to see what the cloud cover is like, whether the rain's coming in from that side. It is coming from behind the pit lane, so if they are down in the garage, then the best way to go and see what the weather's doing or what's coming this way is by going out the back of the garage and taking a look at the cloud coverage which is coming in from that side. Here comes a little bit of a look to the inside. That is the Team Parker Racing number 75 of Keith Bush trying to get past the Paddock, the McLaren Artura for Paddock. And Paddock Motorsport, they're able to hang on for now. This is for, well, it's for 7th overall. It's the number 11 is running 2nd at the moment in the GT8 class, so it wouldn't be a switch position in the GT8 class between the pair of them, courtesy of GTC. Indeed, it is a GTC car behind for Keith Bush, as that was a little bit awkward for the track-focused car of Tom Walpole, just a little bit too deep going into the Fog at ES, and so couldn't quite make that one stick. And alas, we'll have to still settle for the 5th position. That car that they're closing up on, though, that is one to go a lap down. That is, of course, the Simpson Motorsport car, which they'll be sticking a lap on. There's your race leader, though, and by 8.2 seconds, as Lamborghini Super Trofeo is taking control here at Donington Park and fancies to chuck its hat into the ring as a victor in the endurance race around here. They do have another race to do this afternoon, though. That will be the sprint race, of course, shorter in distance at just 25 minutes versus the 50 which we're currently dealing with. At the moment, they're not putting a foot wrong. But of course, the important bit is you've got two drivers. And we did see the pace difference in the second stint once they'd switched drivers was absolutely crazy. And the GCAT racing car really took control of things yesterday afternoon in that second stint of the race, where we were basically seeing fastest lap after fastest lap, and not by a short margin as well, by multiple seconds at certain points. And of course, with the potential of shorter pit stops and the like, again, we'll have to wait and see and how they'll deal with it. At the moment, though, I think the gap is closing for second position at the moment. Last lap, it came down by a tenth. So the Charlotte Gilbert, Tom Rawlings, number 2 car is closing down at the moment on the Jennings Caton Porsche. Take a look at those coming down into the old hairpin, and like I say, that GCAT racing car was so quick yesterday. A little bit too wide as the Top Cats Racing Lamborghini Super Trofeo ran into the old hairpin, and wasn't quite able to keep it fully on the road, but didn't really go into the gravel either, so not too bad. You've got to be careful with going into the gravel at this point, because at that point in the circuit it will pull you further onto the gravel, and it can really muck up your it can muck up your tyres if you're not careful. As we've got 31 minutes left to go, so for those GTH cars, they'll have the pit lane open for them in about 4 minutes' time. For everyone else, the GTH, the red highlighted cars on the left-hand side, for the light blues, the dark blues, and the greens, i.e. everyone else, the battle that we're looking at here, they will be entering the pit lane, or they'll have that open to them in just under 10 minutes' time, so in 9 minutes and 30 seconds. They'll be able to come into the pit lane, but at the moment it's not really a clear picture as to who's going to come out on top. You can see in the background there, Tom Walpole was right on the rear end of Bailey and Brabham once more in that Kendall Developments car, heading down the back stretch into the Fogg ES. So there could be a switch for 4th position at some point in the near future. There is a look back at the battle for 4th position. Way too deep goes Lamborghini. The track focus KTM still can't get the up and under at the moment. It's much more nimble. It's much smaller in a sense, is that KTM, but still just doesn't quite have the grunt to drag itself fully alongside and take over 4th position overall. And Tom Walpole will be losing a lot of ground. Look at the speed difference as they work down the start-finish straight. You're talking a speed difference at the top end of maybe 20-30 kilometres an hour by the time they get down the end of the Wheatcroft straight. So that's the kind of advantage that Lamborghini GT3, the Lamborghini Huracan, has over the KTM of Tom Walpole. But again, that's why they're in different classes. As much as they're battling for overall position, they are indeed in different classes, so they're involved in their own little fight. And Tom Walpole at the moment 3rd in the GTC category, so at least there's that. There is only one GT3 and there is only one GTO. The one GT3 is of course the Jennings Caton car that won yesterday, and the one GTO is the Kendall Developments car that we were looking at there. So they'll obviously win their respective categories. They only get 15 points though for winning because obviously there's only one car. So basically finish and you win. But in that sense, it really does become about battling for the overall positions from them. That's exactly what they're going to be out here fighting for. Awkward line though, coming down into the Melbourne hairpin. Could have been used a little bit more track, but maybe not feeling where the grip is at the moment in that Kendall Developments car. And playing it a little bit safe, running a little bit more in the middle of the road. You can still see a little bit of raindrops in that final corner on the camera lens, and that's because again it did rain a little bit earlier on. It's not raining now though. It's just as again the gap kind of ebbs and flows. It grows, it shrinks. Not too much really changes in that top grouping, as it is still going to be a big 9-second lead for our races. They've come off the gas a little bit though, I will say, the last couple of laps. The gaps kind of held around that 9-second margin for the number 3 car. at the moment at the front of the field. This will get more exciting once we've dealt with the pit stops, but it's been a little bit quiet when it comes to the action in the opening phase of this race. And so, you know, it's hard for these drivers sometimes to keep focused. I said, by the way, that the gap kind of had settled itself down at the front of the field, and then on that lap it opened up massively, as it was a really poor lap for the Porsche 911 GTR GT3 car that we've got running in second position, as into the pit lane. And I don't know, the pit lane was open, that's fine. Actually, no, it wasn't. I was going to say the pit lane's not open. The pit lane was. It's open for them to drive into. But the pit lane will open for the GTHs in 45 seconds. So that was Chris Murphy working his way into the pit lane. And it looks like we're going to be down to just 9 cars in this race, as Murphy brings it into the pit lane for a potential retirement, unfortunately, for them. The Woodrow Motorsports car that finished in 6th yesterday will have to settle for the pit lane. They could have whatever it is repaired pretty quickly and then send it straight back out again. But at the moment, I'm not 100% sure. The pit lane will open for this driver here, this team, very, very shortly. And there is a look at Murphy out of the car, already passing on the information with the helmet off, earplugs out. I think that confirms it. That BMW M3 GTR is going no more in this afternoon's action. Hopefully they'll be out in the race, though, a little bit later on in the afternoon. Again, we do have 2 races today, the second of which will come up at 5:10 local time. So you've got 3.5 hours basically to get that car fixed, ready, sorted, and back out on the race circuit, ready to go. But for now, it does seem as though Chris Murphy's out of the race. This car's found a little bit more speed. Just set a personal best lap of the previous one at 1:32.9, and was able to pull out a 1.1 second gap on the Tom Walpole KTM. So it is looking good at the moment for Kendall Developments, who did finish yesterday in second position, but it seems as though they might be desperate to come into the pit lane and get that driver swap done, send it back out there, and hopefully go on the attack. Did hear a car into the pit lane, and that is because this one is in the pit lane. The Simpson Motorsport car, of course, they're running third in the GTH category. It's James Kay, Darren Ridge, so the driver swap will happen. Of course, you can't really just do the driver swap by yourself, so it will be Darren Ridge jumping out of the car, James Kay jumping in. Make sure everything's out of the way for when you jump in, because again, it is quite awkward when you're in the car. Wheel was obviously pulled out of the car as well, as you could do so with these GT cars. Does help you get in and out. I have been in a McLaren GT3 car before, and I can tell you it was a pretty embarrassing experience both getting in and getting out, but that's because they didn't tell me that you could take the wheel out. There's the Forsetti car in the pit lane as well. So race leaders in the GTH category, and there is the third and final GTH car into the pit lane. The Paddock Motorsports car also in the pit lane. Again, these teams and drivers, they can pit between the 24th and 29th minute of the race. We're currently in the 26th minute of the race, so they are all comfortably within their pit window. Make sure that everything's reattached before you send the car back out again. But you'll see that there's not really too much of a rush in this, because they are timed for this pit stop. They can't just go, right, that's everything done, send it. They have to wait for the correct amount of time allocated to them to have elapsed before they head back out onto the race circuit. And you can see the Simpson car coming out onto the circuit. There goes the Kendall Developments car. It will be the KTM that'll be quite close. Windscreen wipers, interestingly as well, they were going on the KTM going down into turn 1, and not 100% sure if there's any rain coming down at the moment. There is still rather the threat of it, as we had a little bit earlier on in the day. But at the moment, I'm not 100% sure as to whether there is any rain coming down. I don't believe so. It doesn't look like there's any out the window, and no one's chucking up the umbrellas just yet. So that would generally be the final telling point. There's the Forsetti car then out of the pit lane, right ahead of that GCAT Racing Porsche. that currently runs in second position. That's been closed down on by the Lamborghini Super Trofeo of Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings as they head down the hill and onto the brakes. That'll be the GCAT car working its way past. Top Cats will also go right on Pouncing as well. And in the middle of all of that, had Nezza and Porter basically just having to jump straight out of the way. And so the Forsetti car just not moved offline or anything like that, but just basically asked to jump out of the way, going down to the old hairpin, which is again a little bit risky. There, 15.5 seconds off of the race lead. Pit stop for this group will open in 50 seconds time, as it's basically closed and sorted for the GTHs. They've all been in the pit lane, they've all sorted what they needed to sort. And so now it just comes down to the other cars on the circuit. I was going to say the other 7 of them, but of course Chris Murphy is out of this race. I do think that the James Kay and Darren Ridge car might be having a few more problems than it did yesterday, because they only finished, what, 4 laps down yesterday, and they're already 5 laps down, but that's because obviously they're pitted and the rest of the leaders haven't. But it does mean they'll probably be 4 laps down by the time that everyone's been into the pit lane. So it's been a slightly larger struggle on speed today from the Simpson Motorsport car. So I say you might see them return into pit lane to have something sorted. If not, they're just going to roll with it and see it out until the end of the race, as we'll have the pit window open for Group 2. And so it will be anyone with a light blue, anyone with a dark blue, and anyone with a green. So basically the top 6 in the timing tower there on the left-hand side of your screen are all able to come down into pit lane now. And you can see, obviously, drivers getting ready. They're not the only team that will be. Everyone will be ready to jump in the car and get themselves powering for the final stint of the race. You've got the Top Cats car ready to switch over here. As well, I'm assuming that they'll be coming straight into the pit lane right now. They won't be waiting too much longer. As onto the brakes and onto the defence goes the GCAT racing car. Top Cats number 2 going on the attack, and will want the position switch before they come into the pit lane. As straight down the start, finish straight. I think I've just seen the number 3 go. So there you go, into the pit lane. The number 2 will probably follow it into the lane, as we'll see in the background to spot them. There is the GCAT racing car. The Top Cats car, though, is going to stay out on the race circuit. So the Top Cats number 3 is in the pit lane, but the 2 becomes the race leader. So the Tom Rawlings Charlotte Gilbert car, that is now our race leader. The number 3 is the one that is in the pit lane, being serviced and switched over. Very curious to see how much faster the GCAT racing car will go over the final portion of this stint as they work their way past a little bit of the GTH traffic. It's kind of now or never for the number 2 car if they're going to make that move stick. Sometimes going for the overcut can work, get a little bit of clean air and try and fire your way around the circuit as quick as possible before heading basically straight into the pit lane. Is what they'll be aiming for. It's not just the number 3 or the 33 that we've just seen in pit lane, of course. The number 28 Kendall Developments car is also in the pit lane, as is Keith Bush in the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car, of course, for Team Parker Racing. You can see the number 3 there getting wheeled back, and they will head out of the pit lane now. That Top Cats Racing Lamborghini that was leading prior to the pit stops, and they've come out comfortably ahead of the GCAT racing car. Here comes the number 2 then into the final corner and probably into the pit lane as well. Yes, indeed, they'll hold that tight line. And so the number 3 will be out of the pit lane, will remain on the lead lap, not that it really matters too much, as the Charlotte Gilbert Tom Rawlings car is into the pit lane. You can see, courtesy of their victory yesterday, it's been a longer stop for GCAT Racing, as they've actually come out behind the Kendall Developments Lamborghini as well, so they've dropped back a single position, courtesy of taking extra seconds in the pit lane as the success seconds. Because I said before about they've got a, I'll talk about it now, why not? There is a certain amount of time that you have to be in the pit lane. There's a minimum amount of time that you have to be in the pit lane, which is dependent on the type of drivers that you have. So if you have a pro driver, say for example, like the Kendall Developments car, your mandatory pit stop time is 85 seconds, plus the positions in group based on the previous race. For those that have a pro sporting driver, which is basically essentially a pro-am, that is 80 seconds. And if you have two sporting drivers, i.e. they're just here to compete, to take part, no one, like, they're not being paid to do it, they're just out here for the bands, as the cool kids would say, they have a 60-second stop as a base, and then it is added on with the position in the group, which is why this 33 car had a shorter stop yesterday, courtesy of having sporting drivers and no success seconds to deal with, which is why they came out so far ahead of everyone else. Down into the final corner they are going to go, and then we'll have an update as to where everything stands in this race, because at the moment you can see there on the right hand side Tom Walpole in the pit lane in that KTM, as well as the number 2 Top Cats racing car. So the position switch will happen. It'll be the 3 back out in front. I think it might be a Top Cats Racing 1-2 here, you know, as they'll head out of the pit lane, awaiting to see the next group, the next contingent. As there is Tom Walpole in the pit lane, just kind of chilling in the car, because obviously at this point there's no driver swap for the number 13. So being a solo driver entry, just time to relax and get your mindset for the second part of this race as the car is serviced and sent out. I'll take it back, by the way, it will be the number 3, then the 33, then the 2. I believe in this race, as hey, it might even be the 28 lead in this race, never know. Straight down the inside goes the 28 Kendall Developments car, and that will be up into the overall lead of this race. They finished second yesterday, but after a short pit stop there, whoa, that's a bit awkward there for the Lamborghini Huracan. Goes in for a later apex, and that will be a little bit sketchy indeed, but I think 28 might well become our race leader. We'll get the update once they've crossed the line this time by, because obviously those who are in the pit lane, because of where the pit lane line is, or where the timing line is, which is just, they've just gone under now, basically about where the bridge is. It's normally in line of where the starters post basically is. It's not where the start line is. Because of that in the pit lane, it's quite early in the pit lane, which then means that they've got a lot to kind of work through in the pit lane before they're actually in the race and before they're being timed again. So the 28 worked its way past the 3. Oh, they were a lap down. Right, that makes way more sense. The Kendall Developments car then must have been a lap down as it had come through, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, we'll get the update once they've come around this time by on the timing, but it does seem as though that Bailey Brabham Lamborghini was 1 lap down on the Gilbert and Fenwick car, which currently is listed as our race leader. Not sure how they've gone a lap down. But according to my timesheets, they've only done 21 laps, whereas our race leaders have done 22. So the 28's got a bit more work to do. Got to do that, unlap themselves, and then do that move again in 14 minutes. Oh, I don't necessarily think it's happening. It's a 7.7 second lead for the number 3 Top Cats racing car, ahead of the 33 GCat racing car that's won here twice. 3 times, sorry, over the course of 2024. As the Kendall Developments car will head into the final corner and out towards the line, and we'll get the update on that gap, but it is going to be basically a lap down, I do believe. Across the line they go. A whopping margin off of our race leaders who've just come through to cross the line, but that margin for first place has absolutely disappeared. Terrible lap for the number 3 car. A 1 minute 39.9 as they try and find their speed. There is the GCat racing car who won yesterday in the endurance race, who could well be winning here. Big slide, big snap of oversteer, and that'll be the switch for the race lead. So the number 3 will drop back into second position. So for Top Cats, it will have to be the runner-up spot once more, because there was a big move to the inside from the number 33. And for GCat, it'll be the second day where they lead the race, and the second day where they're potentially looking at a victory. And it would be the 4th endurance race they'd won at Donington Park from 4, as I've said before a few times this weekend. They're in strong position for it, and they've most certainly got the speed. They had a very impressive second stint yesterday, did GCat, and at the moment they're looking for an impressive, not just second stint, but first stint as well, to have kept the margin. But the second is where that gap has been absolutely slashed to pieces. And as they head down into the final corner, they'll see 12 minutes left to go in this race. With the lap times they're doing, it'll be roughly 7 laps of racing around the Donington Park circuit. And in that time, anything can happen. Like I say, rain can come down, and then everything's being thrown up in the air if it does indeed do so. It's not come down yet, well, at least certainly not heavily. And everything's pretty relaxed in the teams and drivers as they run round for yet more laps at Donington Park. Close battles on the circuit. Well, the closest that we have is that for the race lead. A little bit of a wave to the camera, nice one. Obviously from the Forsetti Aston Martin that is still leading the way in the GT8 category. By 19 seconds they lead. The battle for the lead was the closest margin there. It's then 25 seconds back to the Lamborghini Super Trofeo of Charlotte Gilbert and Tom Rawlings. And then it's quite a margin back from that to Tom Walpole in 4th position. So I did think I'd seen this. Back into the pit lane then, we have the Top Cats racing car. Wet tyres are being prepared. I can tell you for sure it's not wet enough. So that's an interesting call. They are chucking them on. I don't fully know why. It's definitely not raining heavily out there. That's a very bizarre call. But it's one that they have made. Oh no, I've been told. Let me get the update from cameraman Dan Hyde, who says it is raining quite hard. He's his cameraman here down at turn 1, and the track focus car certainly is feeling that. Wow, deep into turn 1, it is raining quite hard at turn 1 and down the Craner curves as well. So the rain's come in ever slightly. It's very hard to tell because the clouds are so light around here. And even though I can tell now, looking out the commentary box window, it is definitely raining quite a bit out there. So I was saying, what are they doing going onto the wet tyres? Well, I'm starting to understand as to why now, as the rain is definitely coming in. Slow exit from the Kendall Developments car that's gone a lap down once again. They gained their lap back, but they have lost it again almost, well, relatively immediately. Let's see what GCat do, whether they come into the pit lane to service their car again, or whether they're just going to settle themselves out for 9 minutes and 20 seconds. It's kind of at that point where it's not really coming down heavy enough where you need to pit. Like, you could survive on the circuit on the slick tyres without going and sliding off. But you can see there at McLean's, I'm going to counter that again. You can see the tyre tracks being left behind, and that typically is a sign that the slick tyres are probably at their maximum. There's not a lot of spray being kicked up, but when you can see the tyre tracks being left in the rain, that's where you really do want to make a trip down onto pit lane. The number 2 car, though, out of the pit lane and on the wet tyres. This is where we'll get that note as to whether the speed is still there in the car. Their teammates just did a 1 minute 49.4 on the previous lap, which is not great considering the fastest lap of the race was a 1 minute 29. I said there were 7 laps to go in the race a little bit earlier on. We had 12 minutes. I'm less sure about that, as into the pit lane comes the Team Parker Racing number 75. So they're going to have a little bit of a tyre swap as well, as there is the team that's running now in 5th position. I don't think they'll be finishing in 5th position. They are on the wet tyres, the first team to switch onto those wet tyres as we head our way up the top of the crest at Coppice. Just seeing, yeah, no, you can definitely see if you stare at the back of the car. It might be hard with the YouTube compression and all that, but there is definitely a light amount of spray, and there's definitely tyre marks being left. Into the pit lane then comes the race leaders. So, oh, sorry, the team rather second in the race. The number 3 Top Cats racing car into the pit lane. The awkward bit is that if you go onto wets too early, you can overheat them and damage them, so that when it does rain heavily, they might not be working in full operating circumstances. But it's kind of one. It's just not wet enough for wets, and it's not dry enough for slicks. It is that really awkward middle ground that a lot of racing drivers will tell you is actually harder to deal with, because you just never really know. Like, there is no right decision here. Everything just feels like a wrong decision, and the only time that you'll figure out what is right and what is wrong is when the checkered flag drops and you win the race. That is the only time that you'll know, as the Team Parker racing car rejoins the race circuit. This is the most dangerous point of the circuit, though, and you can tell it is arguably the wettest point of the circuit. There's your race leader, happy to stay out on the circuit. 6 minutes and 30 seconds left to go in the race. If you want to know how much slower they're running a lap at the moment and how much they're crawling around this circuit, best lap of the race from them, 1 minute 29.777. Previous lap of the race, a 1 minute 46.933. So they are crawling around this circuit, and most of that crawling will happen coming down the crane through the old hairpin, and then particularly into McLean's. That's where you really don't want to push the car to its limit. Track focused into the pit lane. You can see there around the light, it was definitely raining quite hard. I think there has been an issue for the Paddock GTH car as well, as that's very slow indeed, and not got any drive, it seems. The Paddock McLaren Artura maybe needing to be reset here, as they'll try and turn it off, turn it back on again, and hopefully refire the McLaren and send it back out again. But like I say, the rear firing, it's not really working right now, as there's the track focus car having the tyre swap. This is a little bit more frantic than it was earlier, as there's no minimum requirements to how short the pit stop has to be. And there is the McLaren Artura of Paddock, the winners yesterday in the GTH category, refired and sent back, but with the hazards on, you'd have to say they're probably returning into the pit lane. This is coming down into the Melbourne hairpin and then out towards the final corner, which is where this McLaren Artura is, that's trying to work its way back in the pit lane. Will the 33 come into the lane, or will they stay out on the track? Staying out, they're happy with it. Got an enormous lead, and why not? They're leading basically by a lap. Well, I say basically by a lap. They're leading by over a lap at the moment. So effectively for them, it's spend 3 more laps out on the circuit and don't drop it. Said this race will get a little bit more interesting towards the end, as there comes the Paddock Motorsports McLaren Artura from second in the GTH category. Could well be a retirement. Very odd to see a car come stationary down into the final corner, or into the penultimate corner. So I do think that McLaren might be having a sneaky return into the garage, I'm afraid. As onto the overall podium goes the GTH leader. Absolutely crazy. The Forsetti car is ahead of the number 3 Top Cats racing car by 12 seconds. That gap could come down. There is the Paddock Motorsport car into the pit lane and into the garage. Big shame. Don't know what's happened with that. It's very, like I say, normally the GTHs are relatively speaking quite reliable, even the McLarens. But alas, on this occasion, it does seem as though something has gone slightly awry. It was slow coming down into the Melbourne hairpin. It was definitely slow coming out of when it came to a stop. There's the Forsetti car that leads the GTH category, currently sits 3rd overall. And I would suspect with the rain that's coming down, they've not been into the pit lane for the 2nd time. The rain that's coming down, that Lamborghini in the background should probably retake 3rd overall before the end of the race. If it doesn't, well, it shows that slicks are still plenty all right around here. Everyone's tiptoeing around the circuit at present. Race leaders still setting lap times around 20 seconds off their personal best. It was a 1 minute 48.9. It was a 1 minute 50.4 on the last lap just complete. and a 1:29.7 is their best lap. That shows you how little grip there is. The Forsetti car struggling to come to a complete stop by the time they finish the run into the Melbourne hairpin. There, of course, the teammate in that Forsetti team. Of course, I mean, look, between the pair of them, they've been pretty impressive. Obviously, finished second yesterday, did Mikey Porter and Sam Neser, and it looks as though the victory is on the cards for today. But the most important bit is to not make any mistakes. You can see big slides coming out of turn 1. So they work their way down the Craner curves. As I said before, this is the most awkward and treacherous bit, and I will tell you, the rain has definitely picked up right now. It is clearly raining relatively hard at the moment as they head down the Craner curves and up through the old hairpins. This is where the race is becoming very, very treacherous indeed. Those on the wet tyres, though, they're at a point where they're too far back to actually do anything, despite going much quicker. They're running 4, 5, 6 seconds a lap faster than their race leaders, those that are on the wets at the moment. But there's not enough time for them to gain a lap back, which is what has been gained by this driver and team here. They're about to head on to the final lap of the race, and you can see there, even by looking at the car, how much the rain has really picked up round here. The wind's still coming in quite hard as well, so it's the double whammy of this is quite awkward. But you've made it this far in the race, and so they'll be sat there thinking there's no point in coming into the pit lane now. Why would you come into the pit lane with a minute left to go? Stay out there and confirm your victory. As much as this would be a 4th victory at Donington Park for the GCAT racing car this year, it's not been an easy one. It really hasn't. This has been a very treacherous run. It's like you said before, these conditions are arguably harder than full wet or full dry, because no decision is correct. Driving around on slick tyres in conditions like this is beyond tricky. And so trying to keep yourself out of trouble in all this is, well, there's a fine balance in there. Running a 1:54.9, that is 25 seconds slower than earlier in the race. And those lap times are getting slower and slower as they head up to the top of the hill at McLean's, into the corner, and then down, of course, towards Coppers for the last time in this race. They've still got another one to come up this weekend. And, well, again, they'll be hoping for conditions not to be like this. There is the team that's running in 3rd position as they've worked their way past the Forsetti car. The Paddock car, those come to a stop once more in pretty much an identical place as well. It was slightly earlier on that stretch between the penultimate and final corners. But alas, they have come to a stop once more. At this point, they're probably just waiting for the 33 to come through so they don't have to do an extra lap, as they can bring that car into the pit lane, take the points for finishing 2nd in class, and then get that car ready and sorted for the final race of the weekend, the penultimate weekend here in the GT Cup Championship, into the Melbourne hairpin. And so slow on the exit, got to be careful not to spin up the rears. Such a taxing drive. This one, you can see how much spray's now being kicked up as the rain is getting heavier and heavier here at Donington Park. But for the 4th time at Donington Park this season, in every single one of the endurance races, it is going to be another victory for the Jennings and Catton driven GCAT Racing Porsche. They win overall in a fantastic drive, and they are going to win by an unbelievable margin. It'll be well over a lap that they will win by, because they didn't come into the pit lane. It'll be the same top 2 as it was yesterday. There's a big slide coming through the final corner as the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, the Top Cats racing car, retakes 2nd position. So I say it's top 2, same top 2 as yesterday, but that's not going to be the case as the Warren Gilbert and Fraser Fenwick car comes across the line in 2nd. And that Aston Martin, that GTH Aston Martin that's just come through shot, that there was for 3rd position. It's a victory in the GTH category, but for Sam Neser and Mikey Porter, it's 3rd overall, courtesy of how the rain was coming down there. The 28 there, of course, that is the Kernel Developments car, will take 4th position. And here comes the championship leaders overall across the line for 5th position, Charlotte Gilbert. and Tom Rawlings to take 5th overall. Tom Walpole will be the next one to cross the line, but you can see the difficulties of that KTM coming down to that final corner, not too far ahead of Keith Bush. They're having a battle at about 3.5 miles an hour. It's not quite as dramatic as what we saw at Bathurst a few years back, where Shane van Gisbergen was able to put a move around the outside. I think it was going up towards McPhillamy Park, and that was genuinely about 10 or 15 miles an hour because they were really struggling in very wet conditions. Not quite that slow in that battle, but still Tom Walpole will take 6th position. Keith Bush will have to settle for 7th, and of course there was a retirement on that final lap of the race for the McLaren Artura that belongs to Paddock Motorsports. Another victory ticked off though for the GCAT car. Another superb drive it was for Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton. But that was not easy, I think is probably what they'll all be saying after that one. To keep that car on the road, very, very impressive. I mean, to say you'll have very little grip would be doing an understatement. It just wouldn't do it justice. As you can see how much spray is being kicked up by the number 2 Top Cats car that was in the background going down to the fog ES. You can see how much rain's being dropped off that car. We weren't scheduled to have any rain this heavy. It was supposed to just be little bits of showers, but alas, the rain's coming down. And if it doesn't go anywhere, well, we're going to have a very interesting sprint race later on in the day. Straight into Parc Fermé they're going to go, obviously to make sure that everything's perfectly legal on the car, as they'll and then get themselves sorted for the final race of the weekend. So it will indeed be Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton taking the victory as they did yesterday. The number 3 of Warren Gilbert and Fraser Fenwick will take over 2nd position for the Top Cats racing car. Before we'll have the podium being round out by the Forsetti Motorsports car of Sam Nezza and Mikey Porter taking the GT8 victory as well. It'll be the 28 that finished in 2nd position yesterday to come across the line in 4th, the Kendall Developments car of Paul Bailey and David Brabham. Then we'll have the number 2, the overall championship leader of the Top Cats Racing, Charlotte Gilbert, and Tom Rawlings in 5th position. Tom Walpole will take 6th position with Keith Bush not that far behind, but obviously there was a lap between them anyway, so it's fair enough. Before we'll get the retirement, but still they're still technically counted in this one. Of course, they're the Paddock Motorsports car, the car that won yesterday, Michael Oran and Martin Plowman. They're in 8th position with James Kay and Darren Ridge finishing in 9th position for Simpson Motorsport. And of course, it was a retirement from the race for the number 72 of Chris Murphy, the Woodrow Motorsports car, much earlier on in the race. Again, results very much provisional. You can see there at the bottom of the screen, the fastest lap being set at 29.0. How much slower were they running right at the end of the race? Absolutely crazy scenes here in the 2nd endurance race here in the GT Cup. Of course, rejoin us here at 5:10, so in just over 3 hours time, where we'll have the sprint race and the final race of this weekend as we get ready for the season finale at Snetterton in a few weeks' time. 5:10, we'll see you there.